In a forgotten parish, beneath the damp stone of a collapsed chapel, lies a record. Its script is faded, its wax seal fractured. It was never meant to be read, but what it describes still lingers. In the year of our Lord 1287, in the upper chambers of the stone keep at Winlaw, Queen Aldetha of Northmarch was awakened not by bell nor sermon, but by the quiet ritual of her maids, 6 in number, assigned not to her wardrobe, her meals, nor her prayers, but solely to her hair. It was not vanity, nor a matter of courtly indulgence. In truth, her hair was seen as a relic in waiting, sanctified by marriage to the bloodline of St. Arleon. Queens of Northmarch were never crowned, only anointed, and their bodies, hair included, were subject to the ordinances of divine preparation. Each maid had a station. One gathered the oils from pressed violets and rosemary, infused in lamb tallow. Another held the carved comb of ashwood. A third tended the steam basin, set above glowing coals to soften the strands before braiding. The remaining 3 carried out the division of locks, coiling them not in patterns of fashion but of liturgical meaning, braids in 7-fold to reflect the 7 sorrows of Mary. These rites occurred before prime, in silence, with hands washed in rainwater drawn from the eastern cistern. The Queen spoke no words. She was bound to 28 days of hair-keeping penance following the feast of St. Ulvin, a practice recorded in the Rule of Maereth and kept alive by oral tradition alone. But in that particular year, a silence deeper than prayer had entered the halls. Her confessor, Father Elric, had disappeared on the eve of Candlemas, and the Queen's left braid, the one reserved for petitioning the Archangel's mercy, had begun to knot of its own accord. The 6th maid, Lineth of Bra Hollow, began whispering that it was an omen, that no braid, however sacred, should twist without a hand. That morning the Queen did not rise for matins. Her veil was left unfastened. A loose strand of hair trailed down the back of her carved throne, and though the hearth still burned, none dared to brush it away. The silence persisted for 9 days, not broken by trumpet nor herald, nor even the scraping of the steward's ink knife against parchment. Within the Queen's chambers, the 6 hair-maids continued their vigil, but their hands began to falter. Each morning they found the sacred oils clouded, the braided coils looser than they had left them. One maid, young Bealda of Tarnmere, awoke to find her own hair braided in the Queen's pattern, despite sleeping alone in the undercellar dormitory. Whispers gathered like damp moss in the corners of the keep. They spoke not of betrayal or poison, but of the old rite. The binding of the body, a forgotten devotion once reserved for holy women who had seen angels and been marked by them. The last recorded instance had been in 1142, when Abbess Edritha of Glasfern claimed to have heard the bell of St. Simeon ring from beneath the floor. She was later found dead, her hair wound tight around her throat, in braids no hand had made. In the Queen's private oratory, dust gathered on the silver thurible. No incense had been burned in nearly a fortnight, and behind the stone lectern, hidden from direct sight, was a single parchment left unsigned, a record of intended penance, marked only by the Queen's blood-red thumbprint. No one had dared move it. Late in the evening of the 10th day, the chapel bell rang once, low and cracked. No monk had pulled its rope. From the high windows, those who dared to look swore they saw the Queen seated alone in the inner garden, bareheaded, her braids trailing like ropes across the frost-dusted grass. But when the sacristan unlocked the gates before dawn, there was no sign of her, only a single strand of hair pressed between the iron hinges of the chapel door. No voice was raised in alarm, only the soft sound of the choir boys rehearsing the Miserere, a psalm not scheduled until Lent. And in the D's quarters, Lineth had begun sewing a cloth pouch. Inside it, she placed clippings from each of the Queen's 7 sacred braids. She stitched without blinking, as if obeying a memory that had never been hers. Word of the Queen's disappearance was not sent beyond the keep's outer wall. There was no summons to the Archbishop, no parchment dispatched by horse to the bishopric of Dunhaven. Instead, the castle's prior, a man named Harwin of Velcourt, pale in face and reedy in voice, called for a votive silence. "She is in retreat," he said, "taken by holy solitude." But none could say from which door she had exited, nor which stair she had descended. Her garments remained folded at the foot of her bed. Her slippers were still warm, and yet the Queen was no longer within any chamber that the guards could name. The hairmaids, now without their mistress, were sent to the southern crypt to tend to the reliquaries. There they polished the bone fragments of minor saints, dusted the wax seals of broken sarcophagi, and trimmed the ever-burning tapers that lined the wall. Their hands grew blistered, their hair began to fall loose. On the third night, Lyneth began to hum an old chant, one she claimed had been sung by the Cistercian anchoresses of Kelwyn Mere. She could not say how she knew the melody, nor could the other maids recall hearing it before. But each evening after, they found themselves repeating it, quietly, wordlessly, as if drawn by something in the stones themselves. Meanwhile, in the keep's upper scriptorium, Prior Harwin had begun transcribing a forgotten text. It was not listed in the records, nor did it bear any papal seal. Bound in deerskin with margins stained in ochre, the volume bore a single title in Latin, De Capillis Sanctae, of the hair of the holy. Its pages were filled not with psalms but diagrams, illustrations of women's heads, crowned not in gold but in woven ropes of braid, each labelled with names unfamiliar to the canon: Brytha of Moltenheim, Sereth the Hollow, Maedra of the Knotted Light, and in the centre fold, pressed flat between the inked vellum, was a single strand of grey hair, still fragrant with violet oil. It was warm to the touch. Harwin made no mention of this to the brethren. He simply folded the book closed and whispered, "She is not the first." The weather turned with no announcement. Where once the rains had fallen only at dusk, now they persisted through the daylight. Mists clung to the garden hedgerows. Frost gathered on the carved stone saints above the chapel archway, their faces blurred by time and water alike. And still, no search was ordered. Instead, a new chamber was prepared, not for a queen, but for a relic. Beneath the chapel nave, in a room once used for penitent washing, Prior Harwin oversaw the construction of a reliquary niche, stone-lined and anointed with myrrh. Within it, he placed Lyneth's cloth pouch. He called it the first herring. The term did not exist in any ecclesiastical register. When asked by Brother Malric, the only monk bold enough to question, Harwin replied only, "It has begun again." In the scriptorium, the book De Capillis Sanctae remained locked in a brass-clasped cabinet. But its influence was not contained. Lyneth began to speak of dreams in which women stood upon mountains of plaited hair, faces veiled, arms outstretched, their mouths open in silence. Others in the keep heard things as well. The steward's boy claimed he saw a trail of dark strands leading down into the well shaft. The gardener found clumps of braided hair caught in the rose thorns, coiled too neatly to be the work of birds. None spoke openly, but all felt it. The Queen had not fled, nor died, nor been taken. She had been woven into something older, something buried in the ritual folds of history. At the 10th hour of the 22nd day, the chapel door creaked open on its own. No wind had moved it, and at the threshold stood Lyneth, her hair unbound, her eyes rimmed with ash. She said only one thing: "She is in the braid now." Then she turned and returned to the crypt, where she lit 7 candles before the reliquary niche. Each flame flickered toward the stone ceiling, small, trembling ropes of fire. None followed her. But from that hour forth, the rest began to bind their own hair in silence. By the 30th day, all women within the keep had adopted the braid, some with trembling fingers, others with eerie calm. Even the cook's daughter, no more than 7 summers old, was seen weaving her flaxen strands into loops while murmuring phrases none recognized, fragments, perhaps, of an older tongue. The men did not intervene, not out of reverence, but of fear. The steward, Sir Bartholme, removed all polished silver from the chambers. Reflections, he muttered, could no longer be trusted. And the old mason, Harrowen, stopped carving faces into the chapel's weathered corbels. The stone won't hold a mouth now, he said, eyes distant. It seals itself. Lyneth, once a quiet maid, had become something else. She moved now with purpose, as if following an unseen liturgy. She rarely spoke, save for the hours when she recited names in the crypt, names not of saints nor of nobles, but of women whose hair had once been kept, bound, buried. On the 43rd morning, the Queen's voice returned, not in body but in resonance. As the choir rehearsed the Officium Defunctorum, a seventh tone emerged, deep, weeping, unmistakably hers. The brothers ceased their singing. The sound had come not from the chapel nave, but from beneath. Down in the reliquary, the pouch was warm. The braids inside had twisted anew, forming knots no hand had placed. Lyneth opened it, whispered a prayer not known in any missal, and folded it shut again. "She is speaking now," she said, and no one questioned her. A new custom began, not ordered, not spoken, but obeyed. Each dawn the castle women would place a single strand of hair, cut from their own scalps, upon the chapel's altar stone. It was left there until Compline, when Lyneth would gather the offerings into a linen wrap soaked in rosemary smoke. The altar grew darker by the day. Fine threads lay like fallen ash across its surface, tangling in the crevices of the stone. Prior Harwin now refused to preside over the Mass. He claimed the book had changed, that the illuminated margins of his psalter had begun to move when left open overnight. Tiny ropes, like braids, curling through the vines painted centuries before. He instructed Brother Malric to seal the chapel doors, but they would not stay shut. And outside, the earth began to crack. Thin fissures appeared in the garden paths. The frost no longer melted even by noon. Crows circled overhead but made no sound. Below ground in the crypt, Lyneth now slept beside the reliquary. Her hair, once shoulder length, had grown past her waist. "It is not mine," she whispered when questioned. "It grows for her." That night, the brothers awoke to a soft weeping, not sorrowful, but reverent, rhythmic. A braid was found coiled around the stone neck of the statue of Saint Cadwin. No footsteps marked the dust, no door had been opened, yet the scent of violet oil lingered stronger than ever before, and far in the west wing the Queen's veil, thought lost, was found folded atop the brass lectern, unstained, perfect. It was then that the bishop's men arrived, riders from Dunhaven, clad in red and black, bearing seals of ecclesiastical authority. They had come not for worship, but for inquiry. Whispers had reached the coast, rumours of relics forming without origin, of women refusing the comb, of chapel doors that breathed. They brought with them a confessor, Father Anselm of Arcourt, known for rooting out heresies and extinguishing false saints. He demanded audience with Prior Harwin, who met him not in the chapel but in the ice-cold cistern chamber. There, surrounded by dripping stone and the echo of water, the two men spoke for hours. No record survives of their words, but when Anselm emerged, his face was pale. He did not order arrests, nor did he bless the keep. Instead, he requested solitude in the Queen's abandoned chambers. For 3 nights, he did not sleep. By the 4th, his beard had been shorn, his hair bound tightly in 3 braids, and on the 5th morning, he vanished. His satchel remained, containing only a single parchment. Upon it was a diagram, a woman's head, hair parted 7-fold, each braid labelled with Latin numerals. At the bottom, 1 sentence, Capillus loquitur, the hair speaks. The bishop's men, unnerved and unblessed, departed before dawn. No farewells were spoken. The keep grew quieter after the bishop's men fled, not peaceful, but subdued, as though the air itself had thickened, weighed down by unseen threads. The bells were no longer rung, the choir no longer practiced, meals were taken in silence. The maids, now called sisters by the monks, remained in the crypt. Their braids had grown long and stiff, soaked in ash and scented oils. They no longer answered to their birth names. Lyneth was now addressed only as the binder. She began carving a new altar from the inner wall of the reliquary, not with tools, but with her nails, which had grown sharp and ridged. The stone gave way like softened wood beneath her touch. Each evening a new relic was laid at its base, a ribbon once worn by the queen, a comb found frozen in the garden, a tear-stained kerchief embroidered with 7 knots. The monks watched, but did not interfere. They had begun braiding their beards, twisting them in silent symmetry. On the eve of St. Ethelwyn, a strange frost spread across the walls, not white, but pale violet, smelling faintly of rosemary and candle wax. The frost formed shapes, ropes, loops, letters almost. And that night, as Lyneth lay beside the reliquary, she opened the pouch of braids and whispered, "She will come at the braid's end." No one asked what that meant. The altar was nearly complete. The altar was shaped not in the Roman fashion, nor in any likeness known to the church. Its face bore no cross, only a carved tangle, a knotwork of loops and plaits spiraling inward like a hair braid without end. None could find where it began, none could trace where it ceased. Lyneth claimed she had not carved it. It showed itself, she said, her eyes dim from sleepless nights. Her voice had grown low, as if echoing a second tone. On the 7th night of Frosttide, Brother Malric collapsed in the cloister garden. His lips were blackened, not by poison, but by something finer. Threads. Hair-thin strands had been found coiled inside his mouth, throat and lungs. They were not his own. Prior Harwin ordered the garden sealed, but the soil remained disturbed. Braided shapes pressed through the earth like veins beneath skin. A council was held in the refectory, but no conclusions were reached. The monks refused to travel beyond the gates. The sisters refused to speak of the queen. Lyneth's hair now reached the floor and continued to grow. In the candlelight of the crypt, the reliquary stones had begun to hum. Soft, barely audible, but constant. The same chant Lyneth once hummed now bled through the mortar, vibrating the bones of the wall. No one dared light incense. The smoke twisted unnaturally, following the path of the braids carved into the altar's face. And then, for the first time in nearly 50 days, a voice was heard within the chapel. Not from the nave, nor the crypt, nor from any throat known to those alive. It came from the altar itself. A whisper, drawn out, slow, like hair pulled through water. One word, repeated thrice. Unburied. Lyneth wept when she heard it, but she did not obey. She merely pressed her forehead to the stone and whispered back, "Not until the 7th name is spoken." None asked her what that meant. None asked her who would speak it. They only listened to the altar's breath, a slow, unseen drawing in, as if something waited to speak again. The 7th name was not found in any registry, nor in the abbey rolls preserved in the scriptorium. It was not spoken aloud, nor even written in letters that could be read. It emerged instead in hair, woven into Lyneth's own braid by unseen hands during the long hours of night. When she awoke, it was there. 7 letters coiled through the strands like threads of gold, spelling a name no tongue could form. She did not cut it. She dared not. Instead, she climbed the bell tower alone, barefoot, in the hour before matins. The stones were cold. The bell had not rung in weeks, but when she touched its iron lip with her braid, it rang. Once. Those who heard it did not speak. They simply knelt wherever they stood. Later that day, Prior Harwin collapsed while transcribing a passage from De Capillis Sancti. His hand had begun to shake as he wrote the 7th name, not in Latin, but in something older. Letters that shimmered on the page, then vanished. The ink dried into hair-like lines. He was buried with no rites. His body was sealed in the crypt wall, behind the altar. Lyneth insisted it was the only way. "He's within the braid now," she said. The monks did not object. The reliquary pouch was never reopened. It now pulsed faintly with warmth, like a resting animal. And though no one placed new relics upon the altar, each evening something was found there. A lock of hair, a comb snapped in two, a piece of ribbon soaked in salt. Where they came from, none could say. The keep itself had grown still, the air heavy with oil and dust. Doors no longer creaked, footsteps did not echo. Even the wind outside seemed to avoid the chapel walls. And at night, in the silence, a sound could be heard deep beneath the floor. Not of weeping, nor of speech, but of braiding, a slow, methodical weaving. It continued without pause. No one slept near the chapel anymore. The Queen's presence, though unseen, now permeated every stone. Her absence was no longer spoken of. It had transformed it from mystery to ritual to doctrine. Lyneth spoke of her not as the Queen, but as she who is bound. The title was never questioned. The sisters had ceased speaking altogether, mouths veiled with woven cloth. Only Lyneth retained speech, and even she chose her words with reverence. She now slept only in the chapel nave, on a bed of hair, offerings collected over weeks, washed in sacred water, and laid in a spiral. Beneath her pillow, the reliquary pouch remained sealed, but its warmth grew each day. At times it shimmered faintly, like candlelight seen through tears. One morning, the altar stone cracked, not from age, nor from pressure, but cleanly, a hairline fracture across the braid's central loop. The break revealed nothing beneath, only silence. Lyneth wept. "It begins," she whispered. That night the crows returned, but they did not perch. They circled high above the bell tower, black against a violet sky. No sound escaped them. Only their shadow passed over the keep, long and thin, like a finger pointing downward. The brothers now tied knots in their robes, 7 loops, each marked with ash. They began referring to one another only by number. Brother 1, Brother 2, down to Brother 7. No new monks arrived, no messages were sent. It was as if the world had forgotten the keep, or had chosen not to look. In the chapel, Lyneth drew 7 lines across the altar with oil and ash. She knelt between them, arms extended, hair unbound. The sisters joined her in silence, forming a ring. They waited, not for morning, but for her. On the morning of the 77th day, the Queen returned. Not in form, not as body, nor voice, nor shadow, but through hair. From the altar's fracture, strands began to emerge, pale, violet-tinted, soaked in oil. They moved with slow certainty, growing upward, outward, until they touched the stone floor and continued still. No hand combed them, no scissor dared cut. They coiled along the chapel floor, winding into braids as if moved by memory alone. The scent of violet and ash thickened the air, and even the stained glass grew dim beneath it. Lyneth bowed before the growing braid. "She is ready," she said. The reliquary pulsed once, then fell still. The pouch was empty. Its contents had returned to the altar. That night, a new chant was heard, not from mouths, but from within the stone. A single harmonic tone rising and falling like breath. It resonated deep, pressing into the chest, vibrating through bone. The monks did not resist. They removed their sandals. They lay prostrate upon the flagstones, faces to the braid. The sisters wept quietly, but not in fear. They had waited for this. The braid did not cease its growth. By the 3rd day it reached the chapel doors. By the 6th it passed beneath the cloister arch. By the 9th it encircled the Queen's former chambers, coiling like a serpent made of memory. No hand touched it, no foot dared cross it. It was treated as relic, alive, sacred, untouchable. Lyneth, now silent, spent her days weaving the outer coils into patterns, not decorative but doctrinal. Loops and knots recorded in no ecclesiastical guide, but remembered in her bones. She wore no veil. Her hair now matched the altar's, length, texture, scent. Some whispered she had become the Queen's vessel. Others believed she had always been. The 7th name was never spoken aloud. but it hung in the air, in the patterns carved in stone, in the braids traced in frost along the chapel walls. On the eve of the 100th day, the altar stone collapsed inward. The braid passed through it like thread through cloth, and from beneath the chapel a faint breath was heard, not a gasp, not a moan, but the long, slow exhale of something waking after long centuries. The sisters gathered in a ring. The monks stood in silence. They did not look up. They waited. Beneath the chapel, where the altar once stood, a hollow had opened, not dug by hand nor shaped by tool, but formed by presence. A perfect circle, lined with ash and fragments of stone braid. No stair descended into it. It did not invite entry. It merely was. From its depth rose warmth, not of fire, but of breath, damp, steady, ancient, the kind found in crypts sealed before memory. Lyneth sat at the edge each morning. She neither spoke nor sang. She held a single silver comb in her lap, untouched. The sisters took turns keeping vigil beside her, speaking no prayers, offering no candles, only silence. It was during one of these vigils that a second braid emerged, thinner, tighter, laced with fine white strands that shimmered like spider silk. It moved with purpose, winding slowly around the nave's broken stones, then coiling into a circle at Lyneth's feet. She lowered her head. "She has made her second loop," she whispered. "Soon, the binding is complete." None questioned, none interrupted. The monks now walked barefoot, robes trailing with ash. They ceased to write, to eat, to speak. Their beards had grown long and tangled, and each morning they found them braided in their sleep. No hand had touched them. The comb Lyneth carried began to tarnish. No polish could restore it. Its teeth dulled, its edge bent. Yet she held it close, like a relic not meant for use. In the chapel's highest window, the light ceased to fall. The coloured glass dimmed day by day, until even the sun could no longer enter. Only the violet breath of the braid illuminated the nave now, and beneath it all, the sound of weaving continued, a constant, steady motion, as if the earth itself were braiding its own roots. On the 111th day, the first voice returned. It was not Lyneth's. It was not the Queen's. It was not even human in tone. It came from the hollow, soft, low, gravel-toned like dust speaking through stone. The sisters all turned toward it as one. "3 loops remain," the voice said. "Bind what remembers." Then silence. Lyneth did not weep, she did not flinch. She rose, took the silver comb and laid it into the hollow. It vanished without sound. The breath from below grew warmer. That night a new braid formed, not on stone nor floor, but in the sky above the keep. A line of cloud, impossibly thin, wove itself from one horizon to the other. It remained fixed, unbroken, even as stars passed behind it. The peasants from the surrounding hamlets began to arrive in silence, barefoot, hair unbound. No summons had been sent. They came with gifts, broken combs, locks of grey hair, linen veils knotted at the edge. They were not turned away. They slept on the grass under the braid-shaped sky. In the mornings they helped gather herbs, rosemary, rue, crushed iris root. All were burned in silence. The keep was no longer a place of governance nor sanctuary. It had become a shrine, a loom of waiting, and Lyneth began carving again, not with nail but with hair stiffened by ash. Symbols traced into stone, each braid-shaped, each looped in 3s. "She is almost finished," she said. "The 4th braid tightens at dawn." The chapel walls grew colder, not with winter, but with age, the kind of cold that settles only in places no longer meant for the living. And far beneath the hollow something turned once, a shift of weight, a final thread pulled. The 4th braid arrived with frost. Not on earth, but in the air. A fine dust, like powdered glass, drifted down from the chapel rafters, catching in the braids of those below. It did not melt, it hummed. No one swept it away. Lyneth took to the hollow again, seated cross-legged, palms upward, eyes closed. Her hair had grown beyond her frame, circling her body twice, then trailing down into the hollow's breath. It did not move in wind, for there was none. That morning, a newborn calf was found at the chapel threshold. No hoof prints surrounded it. It bore a single braid down its back. It did not cry. It knelt. And when Lyneth approached, it bowed its head, pressing its brow to the floor. She placed a single strand of her hair upon its neck, then let it wander into the nave. It vanished at dusk. No one asked where it had gone. On the eve of the 118th day, the last book in the scriptorium turned its own page. None had touched it. The vellum curled, and there upon the fresh leaf, a braid had been drawn in soot. Beneath it, words no pen had written. She recalls the seventh sorrow. Lyneth did not speak that night. She merely wept. The sisters lay upon the stone floor in spiral formation, their hair stretched outward, connecting them in a silent weave. No chant was heard, but the air itself seemed to hum with memory. From the hollow the warmth grew, the comb returned, blackened, softened, no longer of metal. She placed it beside her and whispered, 5 braids now. The 5th braid brought water, a slow seepage through the chapel floor, not from pipe nor storm, but from beneath. It carried no scent, it stained nothing. It rose to the height of a finger's breadth, then ceased. Within its stillness, hair floated, thin, fine strands, not severed, but shed. Lyneth stood in it barefoot, allowing her own braid to rest upon the water's surface. It did not sink. The monks, now fully silent, began fasting without instruction. Their ribs showed beneath the folds of their robes, yet they did not complain. They consumed only rosemary water and soft iris roots. The peasants continued to arrive. Some wept, others smiled, none spoke. A woman from West Hollow brought a veil said to belong to her grandmother, a midwife who had once braided the hair of a dying queen. It was placed beside the hollow without ceremony. The braid within the sky darkened slightly, like rope soaked in oil. On the 121st night, the water glowed faintly, a soft, golden sheen like candlelight beneath glass. Lyneth sang then, for the first time in weeks, not in Latin, not in any tongue known to the church, but the braid responded. It lifted from the water, not all at once, but in slow ascent, as if stretching from long sleep. It moved not toward the altar, nor the nave, but toward Lyneth herself. It touched her hand. She did not flinch. She sees, Lyneth whispered, and the braid coiled gently around her wrist. The 6th braid revealed itself beneath the stone effigy of St. Thecla, hidden since the keep's founding. The effigy had cracked along its spine, revealing a cavity within. Coiled there, uncorrupted by time, lay a braid, ancient, dry, still fragrant, preserved in salt, wrapped in violet-stained linen, untouched by worm or mould. Lyneth wept upon seeing it. She did not touch it. She merely whispered. She braided even in death. The monks bore the relic in silence, resting it within the hollow beside the softened comb. The water receded the next day. The strands that had floated there now formed a new circle upon the dry stones, the 6th loop. A new mark appeared on Lyneth's skin, not drawn, but grown, a ringed scar, small, precise, just below her left ear. The sisters anointed it with rosemary smoke and braided her hair tighter. The peasants offered silence. No wind blew, no bird called. Only the sound of breath remained, slow, low, shared. The chapel had become a mouth, and soon it would speak. On the 127th day, the 7th braid began, not as the others had, not with strands or scent or shadow, but with stillness, deeper than silence, a stillness so complete that even the fire in the chapel hearth ceased its flicker. Its flame stood frozen, unmoving, suspended in place like a painted thing, and into that stillness a breath was drawn, not by Lyneth, not by the monks, but by the stone. The hollow exhaled warmth once more, and from it rose the braid, the final, thickest, longest of all. Braided not with hair alone, but with ash, water, light and shadow. Its hue shifted with each breath. Pale one moment, violet the next, then near black, like riverbed silt beneath moonlight. It curled upward, then downward, then wound itself around the altar's cracked base. Where it passed, the stone wept. Droplets of oil trickling from the carvings like sweat from bone. The braid did not stop. It climbed the chapel walls, circling upward in slow spirals until it reached the bell. And there it paused. No wind stirred, no monk moved, no sister breathed. Then came a sound. The single heavy toll of the bell, not rung by rope nor touched by hand, but struck by presence, a tone so deep it seemed to ring within the ribs of all who heard it. Lyneth fell to her knees, the sisters followed, the monks lay face down. The braid had spoken, it had completed itself. The bell's toll did not echo, it settled, heavy, permanent, a final chime that marked no hour and called no prayer. The chapel's walls responded, their mortar lines deepened, darkened. The stone saints above the nave, mute for centuries, bowed their heads, and beneath them the braid began to descend. It moved without wind, guided only by memory, falling gently into the hollow. Each loop of it folded perfectly into the next. The 7 braids, now one, a seamless coil of silence, ritual, and return. Lyneth rose without speaking, her face pale, her body thin from fasting, but her posture was steady, sovereign. She stepped barefoot into the hollow. The stone did not resist her. The sisters did not follow. They remained kneeling, hands bound in their own braids, eyes closed. Lyneth knelt in the centre of the braid, her hair now indistinguishable from the weave beneath her. Slowly she reached into the folds and drew forth the softened comb, blackened, holy, long dormant. She placed it atop her head, not as a crown, but as offering. And the chapel darkened, not from lack of light, but from the absence of need. The peasants outside lay flat upon the grass. The monks placed their foreheads to stone, and the braid began to sink. It pulled Lyneth gently downward as if returning her to something left unfinished. Her eyes remained open, her mouth did not cry out. "She is not dying," whispered Brother Two. "She is closing the braid." The morning after Lyneth descended, no dawn came. The sun did not rise, the sky remained locked in twilight, violet grey without shift or break. Birds did not stir, the trees did not sway. The chapel remained sealed, not by lock, but by presence. Inside no voice spoke, the altar lay silent, the braid gone from sight, the hollow covered once again by unbroken stone, as if it had never been open, as if it had never breathed. But the stone was warm. The sisters remained in vigil, each lying in the same spiral where they had once chanted. Their hair was no longer hair. It had stiffened into something closer to thread, or reed, or bone. The monks sealed the nave doors with ash. They placed no symbol upon them, no crucifix, no crest, only a single braid, drawn in oil. The peasants left their offerings and departed without word. They did not look back. On the edge of the forest, one child turned and said, "She braided the end." No one replied. The comb was never found again. Neither were Lyneth's slippers, nor her robe, but beneath the altar, if one pressed an ear close, a sound could still be heard. The soft, slow motion of weaving. A year passed, seasons came and fell, but the light around the chapel remained unchanged. Eternal dusk, neither day nor night. No birds nested in the chapel eaves, no insects stirred in its stones. The keep was no longer spoken of by name. Maps marked it only with a spiral. Travellers avoided the road that passed near its gate. Horses would not tread its path. Within, the monks had become wraiths of memory, thin, silent, and hooded. Their beards now so long they trailed behind them. Braided, yes, always braided, even in sleep. They no longer aged, or if they did, it could not be seen. And in the crypt, where the reliquary once burned with light, there now rested only dust. But even in that dust, a faint spiral could still be traced, as if it refused to scatter. The sisters had become statues, not marble, but flesh turned still. They did not move, yet their hair grew, slow and deliberate, curling into the stone like roots seeking something deep. No prayers were said, none were needed. Above them, on the chapel ceiling, a final braid had appeared, carved into the stone by no tool, a braid unending, its loops perfect, its center hollow. They called it the last pattern. No monk remembered carving it, but all remembered dreaming it. In the final year of record, a scribe named Halwyn from the coast was sent to the keep. He had heard rumours, not of miracles, but of silence, and of the queen who never died. He entered alone, with ink, quill, and a book of blank vellum. He did not return. But his book was later found by a shepherd miles to the south, on a hill where no tree had ever grown. It contained only 7 pages. Each bore a single braid, not drawn in ink, but pressed into the vellum itself, as if woven from within. No words, no title, only patterns. The last page bore no braid, only a hole, a perfect circle, burned clean through. The shepherd never spoke again. He buried the book beneath a yew tree and marked the grave with a comb. No one has found it since. But sometimes, when wind passes through certain branches in winter, a soft hum is heard, like hair pulled through water. It carries no message, no promise, only the shape of something that once was braided and cannot be undone. Time, as it was once known, ceased to pass within the chapel walls. The sun no longer touched its stone, the moon did not rise above it. The stars wheeled around, but gave no light to its roof. And beneath that roof, the 7th braid remained unseen, yet felt, a presence braided not of strands, but of memory, silence, and repetition. The monks no longer moved with purpose. They walked as shadows do, slowly, aimlessly, drawn by patterns unseen to the living eye. They could no longer read, not for want of sight, but because the letters had changed. In every manuscript, the margins had braided themselves, script unravelled into spirals, Latin words looped into silent knots, pages turned of their own accord. And on the altar, though never touched, the braid mark deepened. Oil bled from the stone as if it remembered her hands. Below the nave, the hollow had closed, not with stone, but with a new surface, flesh-like, smooth, cool, veined faintly with silver and violet. No tool could scratch it, no flame could mark it. Lineth's name was no longer spoken, it had passed into pattern, into gesture. One monk, nameless, voiceless, knelt each night and combed the stone with his fingers, slowly, reverently, though there was no hair to tend. And in his silence, the 7th braid whispered, not in words, not in sound, but in rhythm. Elsewhere, far from the keep, stories persisted, not tales, but warnings, softly spoken near hearths, never written, never sung. Do not braid at night, some said. Do not keep a comb by the bed. Midwives told of stillborns with looped hair, of veils that bled violet when held to the flame, of windows where no frost formed save in perfect spirals. Some whispered of a queen who was never buried, others of a girl who bound her sisters with silence. But all agreed on one thing: no one should walk west past the 7th tree. For beyond it, the braid lay awake. One friar from Eldmere claimed to have seen the chapel from afar, its windows black, its bell cracked, its door sealed with woven hair. He returned barefoot, mute, his right hand locked in a gesture of combing. He starved before the week was out. They buried him with a shroud of ash, but the soil above his grave never settled. It breathed. The braid does not end. It loops, tightens, sleeps, wakes. It remembers. And where memory lingers, so too does she. The keep stones remain, but they are not ruins. They have not crumbled. They have not eroded. They endure, as if protected by silence, as if braced by braid. The vines that grow across the chapel walls do not follow the sun. They grow in spirals, violet-tipped, scentless, curling always toward the hollow that no longer opens. A traveller once brought iron tools to breach the chapel. His blade broke, his torch died. He vanished before the second nightfall. Where he had camped, the grass no longer grows. Only a patch of soft hair remains, grey, thin, braided loosely into the earth. The chapel bell no longer rings, but on certain solstices a hum can be felt beneath the nave. Not sound, but a pressure, as if a breath were being held. The monks are gone, or they have become something else. The sisters remain, or perhaps it is only their hair, woven into the walls, the floor, the altar, moving still, in slow, unseen patterns. No one tends the fire, no one lights the lamps. Yet warmth never leaves. She remains, not as ghost, not as queen, but as braid. Within the chapel no name is spoken, no face is drawn, only the braid. It winds along every surface, stone, wood, glass. Not etched, but grown, not painted, but woven. Visitors who glimpse it forget their path. They return with hair knotted and voices changed. Some begin to speak in loops, others never speak again. One bishop declared it cursed. He sent men with hammers. They returned barefoot, silent, with braids they had not worn before. He did not send more. The comb has not been seen in generations, but combs all over the kingdom now bend on their own. Teeth warp, handles twist, some vanish entirely. At night, women who dream of the queen awaken with their hair bound in unfamiliar knots. Midwives unwrap stillborns wrapped in violet thread. The chapel is not haunted, it is not holy, it is braided, and braids do not die, they loop, they tighten, they wait. There is no record of Lyneth's death, no tomb, no relic, no verse. But her presence lingers, not in body nor name, but in pattern, in the seventh braid that once wrapped the chapel and now lies beneath it. Old folk speak of her only in gesture, fingers moved slowly, one over the other, weaving air. In the scriptorium of distant abbeys, monks have found manuscripts changed. Margins no longer hold vines but braids. Letters interlace. Chapters fold into themselves, forming loops with no beginning. A psalter once used for coronations now contains 7 blank pages at its centre. Each leaf bears the faint scent of ash and violets. The priests ignore it, the scribes avoid it, but still it remains. Children in the northern hamlets wake with names whispered in their ears, names never heard before, spoken in voices too old to recall. They begin to braid things that should not be braided, threads of smoke, shadow on walls, the fur of beasts not yet born. The comb appears in dreams, blackened and soft, held in unseen hands. And from time to time, at the edge of fields where yew trees bend too low, a patch of hair is found. Always clean, always coiled, no one dares touch it. They say the queen has no tomb because she has no need of one. She lives in the braid, and the braid remembers. Once, long ago before the queen vanished and the chapel darkened, a bishop asked her what she feared most. She replied only, "That which cannot be unbraided." No one understood then, they do now. In old chapels, in forgotten reliquaries, in pews no longer visited, her pattern returns, not in fury, not in flame, but in binding. The world has become threaded, each act a loop, each silence a knot. Some say the queen was not born, that she was braided into the world, that her first cry was a twist of sound, a spiral of breath that found shape in a comb carved from root and bone. Others say Lyneth braided her into being, or braided herself out of time and into the queen. But none deny what now surrounds the chapel still. No stone has cracked, no vine has overgrown, because she does not rot, she does not rest. She repeats, and every loop makes her stronger. In a forgotten parish beneath the damp stone of a collapsed chapel lies a record. Its script is faded, its wax seal fractured, it was never meant to be read. But what it describes still lingers. The braid does not move now, it lies within the chapel walls like a sleeping river, its loops hidden behind wood, beneath ash, inside the bones of what remains. No voice speaks, no breath exhales. But the silence itself is shaped, curled at the edges, plaited. Some say if you listen closely you can still hear the sound of fingers moving through hair, slow, ritual, endless. Not of this world, not of death, but of something held between naming and forgetting, between silence and scripture. The queen has no grave, the sisters have no end, the braid continues, unseen, unbroken, unbound.